So first, I would say that companies will need to think about the data sets on which any AI tool they are using is trained. Right now, we are in a period of the Wild West, where people are just using tools and not really spending any time caring or looking into the data that's in a training set. But we know, because people are already starting to complain, and some people are starting to file lawsuits, that some of those data sets contain copyright information. So you do not want to be, as a company, using data sets that are illegal or unethical. This also creates an opportunity for anybody who wants to create so-called ethical data sets, because then you can train to your heart's content, knowing that you're safe and it's fine and there's no liability risk. So I think that's probably the first thing I would raise. Not knowing what the risks are of data poisoning. So when you have somebody maliciously poison a data set, very difficult to detect, very difficult to mitigate. And second is prompt injection threats. So right now, we try to make these AI tools as safe as possible, but the latest research from the United Kingdom's AI Safety Institute, which is working with the United States and other governments, they have just come out with their latest test of the big AI models, foundation models, and found that all of them are vulnerable to so-called jailbreaks. They can all be made to do things that they shouldn't do. So that's a real risk. The UK National Cybersecurity Centre has warned that generative AI tools are currently in beta. So they're in development. They are not yet safe. So that safety risk maybe isn't such a big deal if you're just someone who's playing around with an AI tool. But if you're integrating that into your core business, that's a potential risk for you. I mean, that's the challenge. I'm not going to pretend that it's easy. So again, I think classic cybersecurity principles still apply. You have to think about your system architecture. You have to design with security in mind from the start. It has to be, security by design and security by default. Just because we have a new fancy tool doesn't mean that we just throw out all of the learning that we've had in the world of cybersecurity for the past, 40, 50, 60 years even. So what you want to be thinking about at all times is what data can be accessed, what is critical data, who can access it, what your audit trails are, right? Classic stuff. And then what are you doing to be on the offense? So you're looking to see how you might be vulnerable. How are you doing defense in depth? You're not just passively waiting. And you also want to be talking to other people in your industry. So there's going to be a lot more collaboration for people who are all in healthcare. So if you're in hospitals and you want to maybe integrate AI into your hospital environment, which you could have a very good reason for doing that, you want to be talking to other hospitals and working together as a team, because hospitals are very vulnerable to cyber attacks. So you want to see how everybody's doing it, what best practice is. Cybersecurity has suffered in the past from people being private and secret when they've been hacked. And oftentimes they will just pay their attacker. I don't think we can be in that world anymore with AI because the risks are just getting bigger and bigger. We will have to be seeing companies working with government and working with partners across their supply chain, but also working with people in the same industry or sector to work together. So I think that's going to be new. Well, we are having this conversation here in Europe, and we've just had the passing of the EU AI Act just last week. Now, that means there's a 2-year implementation period, so companies have time to get ready for that. So that's affecting a market of 440 million consumers just in the European Union. I suspect it's reasonable to think that we can actually see that influencing far beyond the European Union, just as we saw for the GDPR regulations that came out in 2018, it was. We're also seeing some movements in the United States at the state level, not at the national level, but at the state level. So that's interesting. I think at the moment, we're not going to see something at the US federal level, something for the whole of the United States, and that matters because so many of the big AI companies at the moment are American. There is AI regulation happening in China, but it's only for what's happening in China and largely between Chinese companies and the Chinese government. It's not necessarily something that's going to have a global impact the way that the EU regulation could. So we're seeing this all happening at different speeds and in different ways, different approaches. Companies, of course, don't want any of this at all. They want to have voluntary self-regulation. And that's not maybe ideal, but it also could do some good work because at least it means that they're talking with each other. It's a start. I don't personally think that's where it's going to end, but it's a start. It's better than it was a few years ago.